if we're avoiding that messy middle, if we're just sort of like trying to get the quick fix, the pill, the retreat, the, moving to wherever, then we're missing out on that opportunity to really get to know what our opportunity for growth is.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Humble Mind Podcast. Nice to have you here. I'm really excited about today's conversation. We have got Franziska Gonder, who is a writer, a leadership facilitator, and a somatic coach working at the very interesting intersection of embodiment, emotional intelligence, and conscious leadership. She's also the founder of the Inner Assembly, which is a community space for leaders to move beyond information overload and into real embodied integration. Her work invites us to lead not just with our heads, but with every part of ourselves, body, mind, and spirit. And this is to help us to foster a better culture of trust, regulation, and relational depth. Franziska, welcome to the Humble Mind Podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, great. Well, both of us connected through another friend of the show, Johnny Miller, who I know you know. And so I was very, very gratified when I reached out to you that we had more than a couple things in common. So that was nice. And your work in particular, I suppose you could call it the main kind of bit of interest right now that defines your work is, we could call it leading from the body. What does it mean to lead from the body? Is there some context, a bit of a story that you might tell around someone who would like to learn more about this, but perhaps has maybe just heard that phrase or this idea for the first time?
Beautiful question. Thank you. When I start talking about like what it means to lead from the body, where my body goes pretty quickly is my own story, and sort of like for how long I felt so incredibly disembodied, as we would say. So kind of like almost like frozen in a way of performing and just doing for the sake of doing, and checking off the to-dos. And it really felt like, for a really long time, it felt like I was just looking for something on the outside in many ways, to check off and to like move along and to attract. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. But what I didn't realize is that there were some emotional patterns that would constantly come up for me. I would oftentimes freeze ahead of like really big work days. Like I would feel so incredibly overwhelmed, and then I would just push through, and I would judge myself for it, instead of kind of like inviting that overwhelm in and being like, why am I feeling overwhelmed? What is that overwhelm? What is that overwhelm trying to like message me? What's the call that I'm getting, or I would often move or like accomplish things, do things very last minute. Another emotional pattern that I had for a very long time. I never sat with that. I never asked myself like, what is that? But instead I would just like, roll into one night shift after the other. And so many of these kind of things started to change. I could go on for hours on that, all of the things that where I was standing in my own way in many ways. But a lot of these things started to change when my father passed away when I was 24. That changed a lot for me. And then I had my first child unexpectedly at 27. And all of a sudden, certain ways of operating, certain ways of being, they just like didn't work anymore. You know how it is. Like all of a sudden, when a child enters your life, like all of the little productivity hacks and the things that you're doing that just don't work anymore. And so and then on top of that, I was like going through a lot of grief at the time as well. And I just my body just didn't want to get up at like 4:30 a.m. anymore and just crank through the day. And I had to start listening to my body and being like, what does my body need? Like, what do I need today and today and today? And so on the very basic level, before I go too deep into the neuroscience and into the nervous system health sort of like realm around all of this stuff that we're going to talk about today, I think embodiment really also means for someone who's like very high performing all the time is to have a relationship with the signals that their body is sending them, and learning what the patterns are, learning how to understand where I'm getting in my own way. And my body is the system that suffers the most. You know, chronic illnesses, chronic fatigue, like headaches, all of these kind of things are oftentimes signs of something that we're doing consistently that's not working anymore.
Yes, beautifully put, especially at the end there. And there's such a strange kind of cultural inheritance that I think so many people have, me included, perhaps you included as well, in what you were saying, in the body require, being something that we need to master and to kind of command and squeeze the most out of. And in many ways, it makes sense. It carries us around the world. It helps us to do things, to accomplish things, to make things. It helps us to make connections with people, to build bridges, skyscrapers, everything else. But at the same time, it feels like it's new information for a lot of people to sort of realize that we've got to take care of it, and that it's not, infinite, and that it is something that also has its own language and its own ability to communicate back to its owner, and go, ooh, okay, we've got to start addressing certain things. Otherwise, I will get sick. Otherwise, you're gonna feel a lot of pain ultimately if it's not addressed. So it's amazing to kind of just underline what you're saying with this idea of the body having a language, and that we can learn how to listen to it and to speak with it, and for that to ultimately not be framed as now it's this crutch, but rather as a superpower, as something that allows us to amplify everything that we can do that much better, that much more greatly.
Yeah, to befriend ourselves, right? I think that sits at the bottom of all of this, of just sort of like, I think we live in a culture where the things that our body's sending us, whether it's a headache or other things, right? It's like it's an annoyance, it's a disturbance, and then we swallow a pill to make it go away, and not feel it again. So we numb it, right? Instead of like, if I have if by Wednesday I have always this excruciating headache, right? And shouldn't I ask myself, why is it always the same? Why is that always coming on? What if I don't numb it? What if I'm actually gonna sit here for a moment, feel into it, being like, have I eaten enough? Have I drank enough? Have I moved enough? Have I just very basic things, right? For now, like, who have I spoken to? How have I spoken to the people that I've met so far? Am I constantly just like, demanding and agitated and kind of like rushing, or am I regulated, grounded, calm, right? Like there's so many things, like if our body's on a chronic tension all the time, the body starts to signal us what it needs more of. So instead of perceiving it as a disturbance, what if I then say, let me go sit in the garden for 5 minutes and take a deep breath and get some fresh air and organize myself for a moment, right? It's like, it sounds so groundbreaking, the simplicity of it. But I'm always astonished with a lot of the people that I meet on a weekly basis of just how the simplicity is the first thing that goes out the window when we're just here to perform. I have this theme in my practice where I help folks to transition from performance into capacity. What becomes possible when I replace my relationship to performance with capacity? Right, going through that journey. What's even my first instinct when I hear the word performance? How does my body feel? What shows up for you, right? Like, how's your breath? How's your stomach? How's your shoulders? Like, what's the first color that pops up? All of these things.
Yeah.
And then let's do the same thing with capacity. 99% of people that I meet all say like, capacity gives me that feeling of space and choice, and my chest opens back up, and I feel like I'm a little bit smarter. Um, right? Whereas performance, sort of like a lot of folks say, like tunnel vision, like I feel sweaty, I feel hot. Right? All of these somatic, so physical sensations, tell us something about our relationship with a thing. In this case, performance or capacity. Leeway, I
That's
guess.
beautifully broken down, performance and capacity, and not necessarily something that's meant to be mutually exclusive.
No.
Because ultimately, when we can free up capacity, that's where greater performance lies.
Yes.
But there's
exactly.
a belief shift that first needs to be, well, I suppose, be broken.
Right. And the belief shift helps us to shift our bodies too, right?
Yes.
And the other way around. Like if we feel better when we hear the word capacity, how do I integrate like elements of capacity into my everyday life? Will that help me to start feeling better, leading better, right? Will I give that capacity also to others because I know how good that is for me and for myself? Right? Those kind of things. So when we start to understand how things make us feel, we also have a greater capacity, quote unquote, for what we want for others. And I think that's where the leadership element kicks in.
Yeah. That kind of natural extended empathy.
Yeah.
Is there something from neuroscience, or perhaps some work that you've done, some evidence that you've been able to find for yourself that has either empowered your work, or perhaps, maybe a statistic that you sort of start conversations with other leaders around this? Is there something there that helps people to sort of realize that these aren't just the kinds of discussions we have on the weekend, as secondary kind of considerations outside of what I'm here to do in my career, but rather, bringing it back to the fore with the kind of thing that brings your attention to what needs to, is there something there that assists you in that conversation?
I love that question. One of the first ones that I learned when I went on my own journey about like 10, 11 years ago, that I still pull out occasionally, is how for every information that the brain sends to the gut sends 9 pieces of information to the brain. And I oftentimes afterwards, I'm just silent, being like, what is it that you hear when I say that? And then folks are like, well, and then often hears like, I guess the gut feeling thing is a thing. Right? And that's true, right? So the way the body, or we as humans, store information, memory, experiences, all of these kind of things, is via the gut, right? Like there's like neurons that sort of like connect. And when let's say, there's this typical example of like a woman walking home at night and feeling kind of like a little bit anxious, right? There's this feeling that you can't explain. Nothing is happening, but the body knows something that the mind can't connect to yet. And so you start walking a little bit faster or whatever it is, right? Or you're calling someone. And that type of reactivity is wisdom, right? Whether it's good wisdom or bad wisdom, I'm not going there just yet, but it's wisdom. For the body, it's just wisdom. And in a leadership capacity, some of these memories that are getting stored in the gut can either support us in our roles or they bottleneck us. So if the kind of memories that have been stored are traumas, right, then they might make us move away from people. That might make us extremely reactive, right? If we have a historically a traumatized relationship with authority, let's say, right? And I'm the founder of an organization, but I've experienced a very manipulative childhood because my parents were really toxic and very authoritarian in a very negative way. the chances are that I have a very distinct relationship with control. And I don't want to give up control because I don't ever want to feel that way again. That might mean that, the way you're managing is more on the micro side of things. At a certain stage, that might impact the way your company can grow because you're not getting out of the way of people that you've hired that are actually really good at what they're doing. Right? And so it's really helpful sometimes to go a little bit deeper than just sort of like helping people to like be more productive and manage teams and all of this kind of stuff, and actually help them to understand like does all of this come from? Because when we get to the bottom of it and when we get to understand like why our body is constantly in that reactivity loop, right? When your head of sales is trying to like be too bossy and you're just like, I don't understand. Why is he always this way, right? And you say like, so what is your relationship with how he's reacting, right? Because if you're not, maybe he's ready to take more responsibility, but you're not ready to give it to him. What about that, right? So we always, as leaders, we always need to start exploring ourselves first and how we are committed to things that we don't want. Like there's always unconscious commitments, right? Like this goes a little bit into the conscious leadership realm. There's always unconscious commitments that we're making to things that we actually don't want, just because they're kind of programmed into our system. And the programming is oftentimes just somewhere, stuck in our bodies because of the way we've learned to behave when we didn't have any other choice.
And perhaps also certain self-protection mechanisms have been part of.
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
forming a new story, about who I am, I'm here to do this. I'm good at that. I'm not good at this. And, those are the sort of the boundaries of my personality. And that's kind of who it is. And it's written in stone. And the idea of being able to influence those things that otherwise seem hard-coded, I think is still quite a big thing for a lot of people to swallow, not just leaders, not just.
Oh yeah, it's a human. That's a human thing.
Yeah.
The only reason why I'm saying leaders is this is sort of like, the work I guess that I'm committed to right now. But like, there is something that I've witnessed in my own journey as a founder and failed founder also, twice, where the level of exposure that a founder or a leader or someone who just takes ownership over the things that are going on in their lives, parents included, okay? The level of exposure that we have to our bottlenecks, to the things that, is so much more rapid and so much more ever growing because we're kind of like sitting at the frontier of quote unquote society, right? We're always trying to push the boundaries of what's possible. Which also means we're pushing the boundaries of what's possible for us, right? We're constantly in a stream of capacity building within ourselves. And so for that, we also need to have a practice that makes us aware of our inner limitations. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means that in order to be of service to others, we got to be aware where we're standing in our own way.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And you've sort of inspired me to ask a question now, just out of my sort of rest of my flow here, but which is, do you think that something like the future of work with the addition of artificial intelligence in the workplace will somehow, in some way, allow us to find the type of productivity gains that we get from using AI, so that time, instead of being reinvested into the business, can go into, maybe a wellness hour every day,
I hope so.
Have a lunch hour, maybe, at 3 p.m. till 4 p.m. There's the ability to go ride a bike, go put your feet on the grass outside, go and maybe do a meditation or quick yoga class. Do you think that there's something really positive in a way that we could frame or even reframe about this idea of machines allowing us to move more closely to taking care of ourselves? Or is that a fantasy? What do you think?
Yeah. I often wonder that too, of like, if that is like, I'm such an optimistic kind of like opportunistic kind of person that, I think I also tend to romanticize.
Opportunistic optimist. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I have personally seen many advantages of like using parts of AI in order to quote unquote streamline certain parts of my business that would have otherwise taken much longer. And so I have more capacity mentally, emotionally too, for some of the clients that I'm meeting on a weekly basis. So I think there's something there, but I don't think I don't think that's sort of like a given fact. I think it depends on the leader that sees that opportunity and then says like, hey, if my people can speed up this process, or we can make this moment smarter, right, in the way we work, what else can I offer them to like upskill themselves or support themselves or like invest into their health? Like that's an intentional thought process that a somewhat conscious human/leader would have. And then take that opportunity and being like, great, I've always wanted to invest a little bit more time into these and these skills for my people, or like offer them this and this, development opportunity, and now we can. I think at this current moment in time, and I speak from experience here, given some of the people that I meet, there's more anxiety around like what AI is going to do because of how many employees are scared they're going to lose their work. So I think we're in this messy middle right now where the productivity hustle, quote unquote, is even greater. Well, now that we can do even more, let's just do even more. Right. And now let's just pump out more products, more features, more things. And so that feeling of saturation has moved further away again. And so I think we got to be very careful and kind of like, people like you and I do the work of informing others like that there's also another way of being in that realm. And then the second piece is also a lot of employers are currently also thinking about how do I upskill my people so that they still have a space and place inside of the organization. There are like a lot of people a lot of leaders, team leaders in particular, that are very afraid that their team is going to lose their jobs over the next 2 to 3 years. I hope we're going to get to where you're going, what you're saying. But right now, I feel like we're more like a messy middle.
So I've seen you use that phrase before, the messy middle. What is the messy middle in terms of kind of, moving through a leadership gradient, or moving through a gradient of developing a skill, or learning how to reprogram yourself, or whatever it might be? What does the messy middle look like in practice, and why is it something we should not try and skip?
I'd love to give that question back to you too. I'm super curious what you would say. So there's two ways of looking at the messy middle. One, energetically, it's something that we're trying to avoid, right? I think just like biologically, it's not something that we enjoy. It's sort of like when you're stuck in the rain, you want to get out of the rain, right? And so you're running home. That can, in a leadership situation, or just, as someone who's trying to develop themselves, not even just like on an organizational leadership level, but on a personal leadership level, like how I show up in my life, how I show up for others, how I show up for myself, right? Those kind of things. We tend to kind of like look for the shiny objects, right? We've all been in a shiny object kind of like moment. And so I see something, right? Like I'll take burnout as an example for a moment. Someone experiences burnout, and then they think, well, if I go to the next 3 ayahuasca retreats that are being offered 2 towns down, that should fix it. We've all heard it before. And so while those retreats can be extremely powerful, and there's a lot that you can see. I'm just using ayahuasca as a placeholder for any other modality of healing that you can choose from these days, right? And so I think there's an avoidance of the messy middle, as in like, it's great. It might offer me some insights into like what I've been avoiding, but am I then actually sitting down and sitting in that, what I've just found out about myself, trying to rewire it, trying to be curious about it, not bring in judgment, offer myself some compassion, offer myself some critical thinking too, and being like, whoa, like if this has come up, like how long have I been running around with this? How long has this been part of my life? Holy shit, this was like part of my life I remember me being at 6, kind of like feeling that, not thinking that, right? Feeling that. I often ask that question in my work, like, how old is that feeling that you just described to me? And then they say, well, I can trace this all the way back to like 2nd grade, 3rd grade. I was like, okay, so what happened in 3rd grade? And then all of a sudden, people start to see sort of like, whoa, how this conditioned thing that they've been running around with has been developing over like decades. And it's still running their lives. And so if we're avoiding that messy middle, if we're just sort of like trying to get the quick fix, right? The pill, the retreat, moving to wherever, right? All of the quick fixes, then we're missing out on that opportunity to really get to know what our opportunity for growth is. And I think that same thing plays out in different realms. That plays out on a personal realm, that plays out on an organizational realm. I can always see certain elements that an organization has been avoiding for, whether it's years or decades or whatever. That plays out on a national level, right? Like politics, like there's always things that, everybody says, don't they see what they're avoiding here? Like, why is it always the same thing? We always struggle with the same problem in this country.
Yes.
Right? It's because nobody spends time in the awkward, messy, uncomfortable middle. We're not allowing ourselves to sit in it and taking that sensation away that is something bad. Because the moment you slow down the sensation of something that really irritates you, it actually becomes a place of like a huge opening. I call this somatic opening. The moment you take the reactivity out of something that feels very uncomfortable and you breathe into it and you allow it to just be present, no judgment, it actually becomes a big opening. It's like a door, a gate.
It reminds me a little bit of some things I've been thinking about and writing about, and actually had a conversation with the very last guy that was on the Humble Mind podcast, where we were talking about emotional intelligence, and we spoke about this idea of willingness.
Yeah.
And it's something I've really kind of been just sitting with a lot, because it's a natural human impulse to over-optimize on things that are good and sweet and nice and warm, and try and kind of underplay or avoid things that are not nice, things that cause pain, things that show us our shortcomings or that contradict us in some ways, just how we're wired and how our nervous systems are wired to deal with threats and so on. And I found that the more that I can kind of willingly embrace situations that are painful in some way, maybe they bring up a memory, maybe it's an argument with my wife, maybe it's a disagreement with my children, maybe it's something that happened at work and someone kind of asked me a question and I kind of froze. And instead of doing what I often do, and I think what a lot of people do, which is to sort of push it away in some way, or to sort of resist it in some way, if I can kind of just sit with it and allow that to sort of fill up my body as though I was pouring a jug of water, just fill it all up and watch it fill up. Not, like you said, not judge it, not try and change it or control it or try and insist on where it needs to go, but allow it to just be there. Not only does it dissipate faster, actually, than if I just kind of like walked around and got angry.
Well, it's a fight or flight response then, right? Like when you hold on to it, right? Then the body learns that it's something unsafe.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And then
that
and then the
continues.
nervous system is like, oh shit, like we got to protect ourselves from it at all costs next time. And so it continues. But if we let it go, the body's like, oh, nothing going on here. Let's move on. Right? This is how the nervous system works, after all.
And in that way, I find that the more I do that, and the more I can stop myself. Obviously, I still don't get it right, but the more that I can just sort of kind of catch. Ooh, okay, hang on, you're going there. Just let it pass. Let it just sit back and kind of watch the clouds go by. Whether it's a moment of anger or feeling embarrassed or feeling just completely out of sorts in some way. I can kind of go back to that place more easily, and perhaps in a way that you talk about capacity building.
Yes, that's it.
Build that capacity to do that and
to be with it, to be with the uncomfortable.
Even maybe allow for the capacity to handle even bigger bits of things that I'm trying to work on or trying to work through, or perhaps that need to, need that space to be felt through, and then for there to be something that I can realize or understand or discover about myself, which there always is.
Always.
So I can attest to the messy middle.
Yeah. There's another element of the messy middle is also that when we look at it from a somatic/nervous system standpoint, the body needs a certain set of repetitions in order to change. Right? Like we've all read like things like 10,000 hours and those kind of books. And there's something true to it, because the body needs to know that certain things that you're trying to change are actually changing, or are actually safe now, or actually feel good now, or right, like something that has historically felt like scary or uncomfortable, right, is now something that you're not trying to avoid anymore. And so we see with people who are trying to change, there's the set of people that are like consistently practicing this new way of being, right? I always refer to leadership as not as a role, but as a way of being. So I often lead with like, leadership is a way of being, not a title, not a role, right? And so for that, we need a consistent practice of doing the same thing that we're trying to change over and over and over and over again. And a lot of people get stuck in that messy middle, getting really frustrated of how long it takes, getting really frustrated around like what happens, right? When you're opening up that can of worms, right? Of just trying to change something, all of a sudden he's like, oh my God, and there's another thing, and there's another thing, and there's another thing, right? And so acknowledging that there is a messy middle, sometimes it's a few days, sometimes it's weeks, months, or years, depending on how severe, especially if it's trauma, right? How severe it is, like not giving up, and always remembering, like I'm training, I'm nurturing myself to be the way that I want to be, and so that I don't get stuck in that messy middle. I see this with clients a lot who like really feel the frustration and the annoyance almost of just, how long does this take? And why is this not fast? All of these kind of things. And I think for us as people who hold these people, it's important to really say, like, give it all to me. Like, I hold it with you. It's okay. Let's get the frustration out. And then let's remember, this is the messy middle, right? There's an awkwardness. Like, we see this with our children who are trying to like learn how to walk, right? And then they fall and they fall and they fall and again and again and again. They don't think about it. They're just like, they know there is an instinctual sort of like resilience built into their desire to walk. And they will walk. They know they will walk. And so I think we've lost that sense of instinctual knowing, right? We've lost that in our very like fast and immediate gratification kind of driven world. Like everything has to happen immediately. Everything has to like be there right away. Nobody is willing to actually say like, I'm here to unfold as a human being for the entirety of my life. And I'm actually loving it. I'm loving what I'm seeing. I'm loving the changes that I'm witnessing. I'm loving like what I'm capable of now versus a year ago.
What an adventure. Yeah.
What an adventure, right? And becoming / unfolding into the roles that I that I've chosen to be in, and not the desire that I need to be perfect immediately. It's I don't know who came up with the idea. I say this to my kids all the time. It's like, guys, I don't know who came up with perfection, but it's not a thing. It doesn't exist, right? Like scrap it out of your system, vocabulary, whatever it is.
Somebody
like,
sue that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody sue him, please. Him, her. It's funny that I said him. Sorry.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It probably was a guy.
Probably was.
There's something there, I think, on the necessariness of patience as well.
Yeah.
And perhaps just patience being something to reintroduce in many ways, or maybe to kind of give patience a different PR company to work with, and how we can rehabilitate the idea of being patient within everyone. And I think that, in businesses, especially bigger organizations where there's bigger teams, bigger departments, lots of different kind of levels of leadership as well. There really is a kind of almost like a premium put on everything being done fast. And there's many good reasons, many good organizational reasons for things to have velocity, to have urgency, to be able to manifest something quickly, to sell that out, to get a customer on board, whatever it might be, to do something quickly, because it's necessary for the organization's nervous system to be able to continue to sustain itself. There's a premium on speed, but at the same time, for an individual, there really is a premium on being able to rediscover patience.
Or rest.
Or rest, absolutely, which are two sides of the same thing in a way.
Absolutely.
The self-permission that you can give yourself to sort of feel that, okay, I can actually be patient. I can rewire some of my expectations around things not needing to be absolutely immediately right now.
Yeah.
And for that to be okay.
That what you're saying, what that inspires me to say is, I think the biggest challenge that most companies face is not speed, but the perpetual, never-ending speed. Speed is not the problem. Stress is not the problem, right? None of these things are actually problems. The problems is when we sustain it for prolonged periods of time. So I think what we've lost as humans, and as a result lost as organizations, right? Because organizations are still run by humans, so we still have to look inward, right, to figure out what the problem is that we're not running businesses or ourselves seasonally. I often hear myself saying, like, you're in a perpetual summer. When is your fall coming? When are you hibernating in winter? Yeah. Right? Like when are you coming out of winter rejuvenated and ready to take on sort of like that blooming phase of spring again? Right? Like, we can do this on a weekly basis. We can do that on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and on an annual basis. Right? Like, businesses, it's like we would call it in the corporate world, we call it sprints, right? Yeah. I always say, it's like, what does your team do after sprints? Well, we just keep going. Okay. So what there's about one. Right? There's another sprint. There's always, right? So what if the days coming out of a sprint are days of reflection, digesting, understanding what worked, what didn't work, and kind of just giving people a moment to just breathe and making that a cultural essence, a cultural element, a non-negotiable, where people know, like, I'm actually allowed to exhale. I'm actually allowed to go home at 4 and be with my family in the days coming out of a really intense work week. And when I work with organizations that are really good at that, you can always see the loyalty and the sort of like just the trust bank account is full. Right. That doesn't mean that it's always easy. That doesn't mean that there's never conflict. None of these things, right? Like, there's ample of it. But it's not so sensational anymore. Like, it's like, I feel like the volatility is not so volatile. It's like people don't dip in the way they believe in their work, and then they go up, something nice happens, and then they dip again because something bad, quote unquote, happens again. But there is more like, it's more even, more even here.
Yeah. I saw some stuff on your site and some of the content you put out on the role of kind of language and the voice. Which is really interesting. I'm endlessly fascinated by the voice, this idea of the voice that we have, not just, in terms of making sound, but also the voice as a signature, as something that characterizes a person or
Yeah.
an individual having something to say and contributing to the well-being of a conversation in some way. What's your view on kind of helping others reclaim their voice, finding the language that suits their voice? I suppose now in the context we're talking about, in the context of leadership and bigger businesses, where there's often a few voices that are heard and the rest need to kind of, be silent or perhaps just go along with what those voices are. Is there a way to have an equitable space in which other voices can be heard, but also, it's still constructive, it can still move along, it can still get things done?
This is very multi-layered. So let me start with the individual again. There's a lot of conversations over the last 5-6 years that I had, that when I noticed that when certain topics came on, people either would like shrug their shoulders or like, they would kind of like move backwards a little bit. And it was just more of like a feeling that I had at the beginning when I started this work. And now I feel like it has become more of like a practice and a knowing. To ask, what's your relationship with your voice? Right? When people would say things like, I feel like I just can't say some of the things that I want to say, or I constantly feel like people are trampling over me. I constantly feel like I know all of the solutions, but nobody listens. Right? Like those are all observations. It's a kind of like a sense making moment that we're all going through when we experience that. And in the somatic realm, what I then do is to always bring it back to the body, right? To always make sure that the person relates it back to what's happening inside of them, rather than blaming others for what's happening. Because especially in a world where it's hard to pin down who's actually at fault, right? And where we can't control others either, where we can't necessarily change others. The only way to start changing and healing is within ourselves. So, long story short, what's your relationship with your voice? Even that simple question oftentimes literally triggers many emotions, many feelings, long conversations, big history. And so I think we first need to help people understand what, in general, we need to help people understand what their relationship is with anything that they're struggling with, right? If someone is struggling with commitment, right? How do we change that relationship? If someone is struggling with responsibility, we need to help them befriend that or change that. If someone is struggling with saying things that need to be said, right? Same thing. But let's always bring it back to the body. Like, where do you feel commitment? Where do you feel responsibility? Where do you feel the constriction of not able to say what you want to say, right? So then we bring it back to the body. We oftentimes understand what that contraction feels like. There's oftentimes a story attached to that, like similar to what we had before, like there's maybe a trauma or micro trauma or just a programming that was layered on top of that, that we want to uncouple. We call that uncoupling. And that oftentimes gives access to new possibilities. If I then have a less sensational relationship with what happens to my voice when I'm in a meeting, in a boardroom with my parents, right? Whoever, I can relate to the contraction, let's say, that I'm experiencing more, rather than being at the mercy of it. So what I want is to actually observe how my throat might be tightening and not react to it, but being like, I can feel it, I can witness it, It's fine. Nothing happening, right? What would it mean to move the needle 20% today? And say something that I've always wanted to say, but I've never said it. Just 20%. Why 20%? Because we also don't want to overwhelm the nervous system. We don't want to overwhelm the nervous system so far that it fires back, and it's way too much, right? Nervous system capacity. I don't have the capacity to actually hold the sensation of like just bombarding the other person with like all of the things that I've always thought about them, right? So let's practice it. Let's nurture that new capacity step by step, 20% by 20%. And from that place, I believe our leadership responsibility is to grow into someone that says the things that nobody is willing to say. Most of the time, we have environments and organizations where many things are happening, and the intangible element, like how people are feeling about it, how people are relating to it, is something that always gets buried in the sort of like day-to-day hustle. You walk into a room, the air is really thick. You can feel that the energy is really off, and nobody says anything. What would it mean for you to be the one saying like, well, it seems like everybody's feeling a lot today. Should we take a moment and just arrive? Maybe just be silent for a moment, take a deep breath, whatever feels contextually relevant. Some organizations are ready to take a deep breath. Some organizations are just ready to be silent for a moment. Some organizations are just ready for a little bit of chit chat, right? It depends a little bit on the organizational nervous system too, of like what people are ready for. But I think leadership, especially in 2025 and beyond, where automation and the transactional type of leadership is more dominant than ever, I think we need the type of leaders, we need the type of people. By the way, leaders doesn't necessarily mean like, the person sitting on top of the organization. It means like people who feel the readiness to claim something and say, I'm going to be the person for it. I'm going to be leading that change. I'm going to say things that need to be said.
That's a very useful way to frame leadership, I think. And a very refreshing one to kind of connect it back to what it should mean.
Yeah.
Which is not just to
it's a way of being.
Manage performance reports or to kind of tick a box necessarily, but to be the one to take up the mantle of certain causes or important conversations or conversations that aren't being had. To be the voice, perhaps for those who don't or can't find a voice for themselves. In a way, that's what it means to lead. And I think an important way to see leadership as a responsibility rather than a privilege, or rather than something that is sort of entitled, or that everyone is also cut out for. Not everyone is, and that's okay.
No, not everyone is. No, and
there's a glorification of leadership, in a way. There's a glorification of kind of being the king of the hill, and this is what I look like on Instagram, and this is what my pay package is, and blah, blah, blah. But obviously there's all the other sides to it, the shadow sides we don't always see, but it's also something that I think not enough people stop and realize, do I actually want that for myself? I'm told I want it, but do I?
That in and of itself is a conditioning, right? That we're all conditioned, that we all need like the great degrees and all of these big things in order to be someone. One of the things that I say to my eldest a lot at the moment is like, who's very much like, he doesn't struggle in school, but school is not necessarily the place where he comes alive. We've already taken our kids out of like a public school system, and they're like in a more like sort of like collective learning environment. But I say to him, like, you don't need to go to university. You don't need to like do anything. You need to figure out what you're incredibly good at, and where you say, I want to get better at it. And maybe that means you want to go to university. Maybe that means you're going to go do an apprenticeship somewhere. Maybe that means you're going to walk up to someone that you really admire and being like, can I work for you? But for me, to like give my son that choice to kind of like figure out and like be on that journey with him. that for me means like, that is leadership to me.
Yeah,
Like
very
my
empowering.
son, yeah, my son is like extremely good at art, really talented. Maybe I am as a parent, as a leader of him, right? Quote unquote, in the idea of, um, maybe I would waste his time putting him and telling him he needs to go to university. If he instead like could maybe go and, do a residency somewhere and
Yeah.
thrive and
Yeah.
become an artist much earlier than he could, because he's not stuck in a building for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
And again, like I loved my university days. I love what I gathered there. Like, but I
But
don't
he's not
think
you. Yeah. And that's the point.
exactly, and that's the point, right? Like I think we need to get better, and it starts with raising children, right? It's sort of like seeing what they're all cut out to do and who they want to be and why they're here. Um, there's like 3 questions that I give to every single client before they start the journey with each other. It's like, who are you? Why are you here? Where are you going? Right? And just for people to sit with it, to reflect on it. And it's so fascinating. I don't
What
give
comes
any
out? Yeah.
what comes out, because I don't give them like, hey, this generally, like, why are you here on planet Earth? No, like sometimes they respond with, why are you here in this coaching relationship? And then I know, okay, they really just like, they really focused on the here and now, right now. There's something that really needs to happen quickly for them to like feel like there's momentum. But when I see a client who's like, so why am I here? Like on planet Earth, why was I born? Right? I'm like, okay, so there's someone who's asking for a bigger why in life, right? So I need to like make sure I go on that journey with them and satisfy that need for a bigger picture. So we work on like bigger picture a little bit more, on like the bigger picture of your leadership. Why are you here? Like, what is your role in this moment in time, right? And for them to be connected and then go granular. And so I think there's a lot that we can learn by just witnessing people the way they are and picking them up right there.
Yeah. Is there something kind of, when I say practical, I don't mean, just something kind of silly, but a practice perhaps that someone might want to try even after listening to us talk, or something they could, put into practice tomorrow, with their team, at home, within their small business, that you feel is something that is effective enough to allow them to feel like they can stay consistent with it, because it's always about consistency and repetition ultimately, but also enough for it to not feel like it's too out there, or that it's too sort of, or unfamiliar in some way, because we stay away from things that are unfamiliar, that we can't. So have you found a kind of a prescription or a recommendation of a practice as something that works in that first base?
So you're saying something to kind of like get people started.
Yeah, I suppose I should have said like specifically around this idea of somatic leadership,
Yeah.
from or with the body as a tool, the body as an advantage, and how to begin to learn and to study what's going on and make some of these larger changes possible just by starting on something today or tomorrow.
Yeah. So I think at the very beginning, foundationally, what we all should understand, this applies to every single human on the planet, is what is your most dominant survival response? So we have freeze and fight, right? We have fight or flight, and then we have freeze. We have fawn, which is people pleasing, right? And funny enough, what we know the most is fight or flight and freeze, right? Those are the sort of like the more popular ones. Fawn is actually the one that was added much later, because it's the most dominant one for a lot of women, and women were never included in the research when they were investigating like survival responses. So the reason why I say that is it tells us again how important it is to also go and experiment with yourself on understanding like maybe it's also a mix of things, right? I don't think this list of fight or flight, freeze, and fawn is exhaustive. So go explore, right? But what I'm trying to say with that is like try to sort of like either visualize your week or reflect on a week, depending on, you know, where you see more friction happening or friction happened. And close your eyes and kind of like take a few deep breaths and then feel into some of the interactions that you have with people on a weekly basis. And what happens when you experience conflict? What happens when you experience frustration? What happens when you experience someone who's not listening? What, like, you know, things that just go and like write a list of things that you like from an emotional pattern standpoint, kind of like experience on a weekly basis. And then try to feel into your body what happens in your body. So for someone who might experience freeze, right? What they might feel is they close their eyes and what they see is, I get really quiet. I kind of just don't say anything at all. I just nod, right? That's sort of like freeze plus fawning. I get really agitated and aggressive, fight. And then when I leave the room, I'm completely exhausted, right? Which is oftentimes a sign that the nervous system just went into overdrive and it doesn't have the regulatory ability to kind of like move back into homeostasis, which is a topic that we haven't gotten into today, but maybe on a second round. And so just try to explore how you navigate the world, literally. Like, what is your first instinctual response? Do you get really cranky, really agitated, really angry, right? Do you just kind of like don't say anything, get really quiet, dissociate from your body? People are like, hey, are you still here? Are you still here? Oftentimes like, you know, major freezing plus dissociative behaviors. And when we explore that, try to like feel into what would happen if you would start to thaw that. So like literally like thawing, that the idea of like melting. And just like go close your eyes and kind of like feel like what would happen if I would just have that melt and it would not need to protect me anymore. There's like a few steps that I would in a session would take in between. I would sort of like, hey, what is it? How is this survival response protecting you, and why was it important for such a long time, right? But if you just want to entertain the somatic element, right? How would it feel to thaw that and be like, what if I don't need it anymore? And then entertain, how would that change the way I would want to engage with some of the people that I'm like really challenged by on a daily basis?
Yeah.
This is not easy, not simple, but it's a very important foundational element. Like understanding what our sort of like core survival responses are and how they're getting in the way or not, right? How they're getting in the way of who we want to be, how we want to lead, the relationships that we want to have. That, by the way, like family, friends, work, community, doesn't matter. You can apply that anywhere. I just apply it to the leadership environment, but this is applicable anywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a great recommendation. And I suppose also to add to that would be, which I think would be useful, is that just a dose of some willingness to be surprised along the way too, because it's very easy to maybe begin to pay attention to some of these things, like what, you know, how do I respond to this, or what is my normal approach to that, to a conflict situation, to something that makes me feel uncomfortable. And for the brain to kind of get in the way of that. Yeah. Because it doesn't want to admit, or it doesn't want to like, no, well, you know, and to kind of, you know, redirect the river of the story so that it ends up being something that's more kind of comfortable, and that, no, you see, nothing needs to change. You're fine, you know?
One of the One of the things that I love the most about what you just said is like, it reminds me of the power of curiosity.
That's it.
I personally believe that curiosity is the greatest force of healing in the world. If we would all, engage and lead with more curiosity, we wouldn't have a lot of the global problems that we do have. And so just to even recognize, like when you start this exercise, to be like, I just want to be curious, right? Curiosity for me in my body is very playful. It's joyful. There's no right or wrong. I feel like I'm in my 9-10-year-old self, right? That just like is having a good time and is like, kind of fascinated by something. Unattached. And you're fascinated by something too, right? At the same time. And so even that, like the exercise of curiosity is a great, like other exercise that people could do, right? That listeners could do, of just sort of like engaging with like, how does curiosity feel in my body? And how can I do more of that every day? How can I access that? We often talk about somatic markers, right? When something is a positive experience that we've discovered, we want to mark this in our body. So for me, for instance, curiosity sits sort of like but sort of like in my chest and around my sternum, kind of like in that, right in that area. And so what helps is either to put your hand there or to just really mark it in your mind, right? For people who are not as somatically attuned yet, like saving it in your mind is a first good step. And then when you feel like you could really use some curiosity, get in the habit of like, touching that point and being like, this is how I can access it. Because the body loves saving things in different parts of our body and then pulling it out when I need it. And so it's that could be a cool exercise too.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah. And yeah, I'm also a fierce guardian, a curiosity warrior of the need to be curious and all of the things that it brings forward.
It's why you ask so many good questions.
Yeah. I'm also a big believer in the power of community, not just for the obvious reasons, but also in this space as well, where there's the ability to go and do some of the invitation you've just given, which is to do some of the initial self-exploration and to go, okay, that's interesting. That works like that. I didn't always pay attention to that. Now I know that. And then to kind of bring that into a space with someone else, whether it's with 2 people or 10 other people, hopefully ones that you trust, and then being able to share that reflection and to talk about it, because I think we're really good at processing things when we don't just have our own minds to process with. In fact, that's when it stays unprocessed. But there's the ability to kind of talk and make sense and overhear yourself talk through something, and then someone else kind of spits it back to you and go, I wouldn't have put it like that, but that's given me something extra to think about. And there's a real kind of shared sense making.
That's when you also know you're in good company, right? When that can happen. Which is why you curate the communities that you do, why I curate the communities that I do, because it's exactly what people need. More curious environments, more environments where people are allowed to be with unfiltered, right? Where like things can come up and I don't need to like guard it and shield it, right? But I can practice that new way of being that we talked about today, of just sort of like, when I join Alex's community, like this is where I really practice to show up differently. This is where growth happens, right? This is the kind of stuff that we need.
And if I am really important, and this is a big part of like kind of my own little community building philosophy, is that if I am doing that, but I perhaps am not being honest in some way, or I'm not letting it all out in a way that would probably be good for me, there's someone there to go, I'm going to challenge you on that. I feel that there's, you know what I mean? The safety, the openness, and the ability to receive, 100%. I suppose, what initially might feel like criticism or a level of being confronted, but that is also its own almost initiation, to be able to go, you're right, I am bullshitting you, and I'm bullshitting myself in that same way, and here's why, and perhaps here's what's underneath that, which obviously is always
without feeling that shame coming on
or attacked. Yes, exactly.
Right. Which I think, again, like this needs to be a commitment, a setting that allows that kind of like being called out and knowing that people mean well and not attack or, put you into a shamed situation. So again, as leaders, we have the chance to always, every single day, make the decision of creating environments where we're allowed to be called out and we mean well, or where that becomes a toxic trait culturally, right? And we need to be more careful of like which one turns into which one, right? Like it's fine, which is why I'm a big believer also in like especially with AI on the rise and stuff, like the chief people officer role, or like the people team in general, I think will have a very different role in the next few years.
I mean, this is also why I'm really bullish on communities and the application of community sort of containers, certainly within business, but everywhere else. But in the example you just gave now, where I'm a big believer in the idea of communities being in the future being less like kind of networks and more like neighborhoods, where they're sort of more kind of closely integrated. It's obviously high trust and high value, but at the same time, there's a sort of a locality, even if, you're in Alaska and I'm in Australia, not physical locality, but there's a locality in terms of values and kinds of things that we do here.
Wow. I love that you just said that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate
like a
that.
neighborhood, like neighbors, nice and kind of familiar and friendly and warm.
Yeah. And sometimes, especially when we can have that locality within a geographical,
of course,
setting, that stuff, what you just talked about, is so important. I've seen this so many times of just, people saying to me, like, I just can't seem to find these people where I live or where I am. And so I'm really grateful that someone, took the initiative to kind of build something where I can feel home, where I feel that sense of belonging and safety and dignity with others. Totally.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Before we go,
yes,
tell us about your community, the Inner Assembly. What's that about? And someone who is curious about it, where can they go?
So the Inner Assembly is a new program that we just built. It's part of the organization that I run, Leadership That Heals. And it's a practice environment for people who either want to improve their self-leadership or their organizational leadership, to go and dive deeper into some of the things that we talked about today. A lot of like psychological tools, right? Somatic leadership, but also like internal family systems and many other modalities that sort of like help us to better understand how to improve the relational element of leadership. It's a year-long container. We meet once a month. In the odd month, we have a new theme, and then the even month we integrate it. And there's a lot of sort of like just community and prompts and all of these kind of things happening in between. The reason why we chose the monthly cadence is, in fact, because we're really encouraging the participants to just practice and not wait for the content to come in. Like I've learned in my journey that the thing that's kind of like moves us further away from actually trying to do something and become someone is when we stimulate ourselves with too much content. And so I wanted to create something where people are committed and dedicated to show up, to practice with each other, and then be in touch with each other, and then integrate with each other. And not just for 3 months, right? Like kind of compressed and then you're left alone, but like sustained for a year. So it is something that you can really become better at, but it doesn't hijack your agenda either, because people are still busy, right? Yeah. So it's it's a great community. We have like 2-3 spots left. We're starting off in November, end of November, and we'd love to meet anyone who's interested.
Wonderful. Awesome. Sounds great. Well, you heard it here. Yeah. Franziska, thank you so much. I think we could speak for hours.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to the next one, where we definitely need to do it in person, whether that's in Portugal, Spain, or Costa Rica. Who knows?
Who knows? So I'd love to see you in Spain.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Humble Mind. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're curious to take a look at our community, if you're not a member, you're missing out. make sure you head to humblemind.co to check out more and to see what we're up to. I look forward to seeing you there. Until next time.